Mr. Chairman, whenever you're ready.
All right. I'm going to call the Planning Board and Zoning Commission meeting of January 14th to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Robert?
Present.
Gray? Newton?
Here.
Eccles Bell? Boise?
Here.
Conley?
Here.
Di Benedetto?
Here. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 10th?
I move to approve the minutes of December 10th as written. Oh, wait, there was one small correction, but
Okay.
we'll see if anybody else has it as well. Okay. And that was on page 8, public comment. And the line says, presented in red letter from Kate Hampton, which discussed the park's eligibility for the National Historic Registrar and eligibility criteria and potential impacts from proposed ice rink, which they did not, that letter did not discuss that. It says, or development on adjacent property. And I reread the letter, and definitely not adjacent property.
If that's,
That was the only correction that I saw. I don't know if everybody has this letter.
if it's a letter to us, I don't think we can change the wording.
It's a letter from the Deputy Historic Preservation Officer, Montana State, to Becky Van Horn. And it's not change what she says, but there was no discussion on adjacent property, we can change our minutes, since this letter did not refer to the adjacent property.
Is that an error in the way it was copied into our minutes?
Well, it wasn't copied into our minutes, it was just...
I mean, we had a whole series of attachments.
We did have
And
attachments.
so that was, so are you referring to our minutes or to
Our minutes
okay.
that are referring to the letter
To that letter, right.
and what that letter actually states.
Okay.
I mean, it did say at the state and federal levels, listing and eligibility do not impact an owner's right to use after or demolish their properties, which is not what, this is eligibility criteria and potential impacts or development on adjacent property. And there's no mention of adjacent properties at all in this letter. So what I would suggest is to strike potential impacts on proposed ice rink and leave it at that. Get rid of the rest of the sentence, or development on adjacent property.
So what your suggestion is to delete or the development on adjacent property?
Correct.
I'll second. I won't sleep over that going away.
We still have the letter.
Yeah.
In the letter that we're reading from, that it references,
It's this letter.
does not address the adjacent properties.
Does not.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion to, are there any other discussions on the minutes? Do we have can I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
I will second.
And you got that strike and,
Yep.
okay, where it says, or development on adjacent property, okay. Have a roll call, Greg?
Roberts,
Aye.
Stephen,
Yes.
Boise,
Yes.
Conley,
Yes.
Benedetto,
Yes.
Sorry, I'm late.
Gray.
Yep.
Welcome back.
Okay, we don't have any new business. Next on, oh, wait a minute. Communication from the board and council, Urban Renewal Agency. We didn't meet this month, and we don't have any updates from the last time, so, city council update?
Next council session, we will be reassigning, council members to their different standing committees and boards. So just something to keep in mind. Things may switch up a little bit. Don't know though, so I think it's about,
That's it?
I mean, there's a lot of other things, but pertinent to here.
Marnie's not here from the county planning board. You had some information?
This morning, Commissioner Bill Bullock did talk to the MLS, and I took some notes, things that pertain to planning. One, he said Forest Mandeville, it should be the first call for any planning projects. The county growth policy is having a public meeting on the 20th. I thought it was interesting that new subdivisions are required to approve an SID right from the start, so that when the roads need to be kept up from the beginning, they'll go ahead and start with an SID, Special Improvement District. Floodplain administration is being handled by Amy Bailey out of Joliet at the Conservation District. They do have a grant to map the channel zone migration. Hopefully should be completed by June or July. Cedarwood, they've accepted a bid on the demolition, done by June, hopefully. Affordable housing was interesting. House Bill 819, Carbon County, has been approved for $300,000. But the land has to be donated, and the Housing Authority will do everything. They have plans, and they'll do everything right down to managing it afterwards. So reduction. New subdivisions approved include Fox Run, High Ridge, south of town on the West Fork, and more in Fromberg. Just as a note, that High Ridge subdivision was approved with cisterns, and even though it was approved with cisterns, the county's being sued by Friends of Willow Creek. Apparently, there's a 60-pound document that the county just got from the attorneys, and apparently there is a septic tank issue, but everybody knows it's a water issue. That was it.
All right, thanks. Communication from the mayor?
Two things. The foundation reached out. They are a subrecipient. They have a CDBG grant that's basically a housing needs assessment. It looks to be probably about a 6-month commitment. They're looking to wrap it up in a 6-month time frame. So I said 6-month commitment from somebody there. And they have requested that we appoint somebody from council or the city to be a representative of that, and also somebody from planning board. And so while we can't do anything with it this time, I would like to put on the agenda next time, and then in the meantime, people can think if that's something they'd be interested in. That's basically a housing needs assessment. They go through, they look at the inventory, talk about the growth. Yeah, a lot of the statistics and data that we use and have referred to in our documents, they're updating one of those studies. And so if there's somebody from the planning board that is willing to take that on, I would like for you guys to put that on the agenda and appoint somebody at the next meeting if you could.
You know when the last needs assessment was done?
They told me, I want to say it's been like 10 years. There was one that was started as an FYI that you might be remembering that got suspended when we were doing the URD project with Kansas State. They actually put this one on hold. So this is actually picking up, and part of that was twofold. They didn't want overlapping efforts and projects, but part of it was one of the things that they do in those is they do a land assessment and identify potential building lots. And so there were some lots that we have in the city that may not have been options at the time that may be becoming options and stuff, and they wanted to wait and see what's there, which is a fantastic lead-in into my second comment, which is that there is a request from council several months old, but realizing that it fell into your rezoning thing, you will recall that there were several pieces of property that are currently zoned X or Y or not zoned, that there was a request to do. And I would just like to prioritize that. Specifically, there is that corner up at the top of Brewery Hill on the south side that is currently designated as park. It's designated as part of the airport, but when they removed the road, it's now bifurcated from the airport. There have been conversations on whether that's a good place to look at housing. We've had conversations about that. In the current environment, there are conversations if that's a good place to put at future parks or natures of parks. And so I would like to just kind of a bug in the ear and a reminder that it would be helpful. And Jeremy, I'm glad to see you here. Thank you. I take that as a sign that things are going well on your end. But I would like to see a recommendation from our planner and then the discussion from the planning board. If it's possible to provide some guidance sooner rather than later on that, I think it might be good information just for public discussion, how to use some of those parcels that have been identified. That was all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any comments or questions from the board on any of that? All right, moving on to new business, which we don't have. Next on the agenda is public comment on agenda items, and essentially all we have on the agenda tonight is continuation of our review of our zoning regulation update, and then that's followed by another public comment for items not on the agenda. I guess I'll just ask if there's any interest in making public comments on items on the agenda or on something else.
Chairman, I do appreciate that. I guess my comments can be very brief because I expected to see something on today's agenda.
What are you commenting on today's agenda?
No, you asked if we would like to speak to something that's not on the agenda. So that's what I'm speaking to.
Okay.
To clarify that,
Could I
you will not meet before the next council meeting.
need your name and address?
Okay. My name is Bessie Scanlon. Address is 401 North Ward Avenue. I've been a resident here. My family came here in the 40s, which gives you an idea of how old I am. So, but I wanted to speak to the Lions Park issue, and so I was surprised that was not before you now because you're not going to meet before the next council meeting. So I'm going to presume that will come back to you after the council has had a presentation, and then you will be able to do your review of it and give your recommendation because it is use of city-owned property. So I think that's really all I need to say. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunities for the public to participate because it's really important that we do communicate, and I appreciate the time you guys take to serve us too. So thank you. That's all I need to say tonight. Thanks. I can leave some, I think I will.
If you want to leave it with Greg? If you have something you want to put in the packet.
Yeah. You might as well get it, guys and gals. Thank you.
Got multiple copies.
Yeah, one copy. There's an original on top for the record, and there's a copy for just one.
Any other comments? There, and,
I see no comments online. In fact, all those present online are party to the meeting, so. For all those online.
all right, so we'll go ahead and close public comments. Moving on to the old business, and we've been reviewing the land use table and the zoning regulations. And hopefully we can finish that tonight and move on. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeremy.
Sorry.
And you have to remind me where we left off, because it's been a
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually let Greg get us started off because I missed the last couple of meetings, I think. So I'll have Greg. He looked like he pulled up the document. So I'll have him get us started, and then I will jump in with questions, comments, or as we go.
All right.
Is that zoomed in enough?
What'd you
That's
say, Greg?
perfect.
What'd you say, Greg?
Is that zoomed in enough for everyone?
I think so.
Okay. We're on retail.
Well,
This is where we left off.
Okay.
I need to copy and paste it.
Oh,
I'll do that.
okay, I guess.
Thank you. That helps.
Is this the new one that you sent over today?
Yeah. Sent over the new one that kind of cleaned it up. Anything you've changed is in red. And then I started grouping items together. I don't think I pulled anything up from the bottom, but I realized that after the fact.
Okay.
But we'll be going through it again, so.
All right. Any comments on what we have for permitted use or conditional use for retail with any of the zones? It's essentially no change from what we currently have,
Exactly.
so just moving on down to restaurants.
I guess I have a question on retail for the board. For C1, we have it listed as a conditional use permit. Is that really the intent? I mean, retail is typically allowed in commercial districts.
Well, that's our transition zone, so it's mixed residential and commercial, and I think the rationale for having a conditional use there is primarily to allow neighbors to inform of any potential commercial uses.
Okay.
Within,
No, I just wanted to bring it up and just make sure that was still what you wanted for C1.
Okay. Moving on. Restaurants?
Restaurant.
It looks like we have two listings for them.
What's that?
It looks like we have two listings for restaurants. The top of the second page also says restaurants.
Are they different?
They are.
They are different.
Of course they are.
Why
We have
wouldn't they?
C1 is conditional on the first one, and on the second one, we have C2 is conditional, but not C1.
Hilarious.
I'll copy them.
And same with the permitted use. On the first page, we have permitted in, C3 north and south, but on the second page, it's permitted north, south, and C4. Should we start with C1?
I copied it up to here, so they're all.
Oh, good, so they're together.
Yeah.
So the question
Well-
is,
Greg, go ahead and delete that other line while you're at it.
Oh, I see, okay.
There you go.
so should C1 be conditional and C2 conditional?
That's my thought.
Those are those transition zones.
Yeah, that's one thing too is, and again, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I don't see why we don't just do a mixed zone or actually say transit, like, just be useful to know, because when you're going through this and you see commercial, you think commercial.
Mhm.
It might be smart to actually make like a different, like a T or,
A lot of cities will do commercial mixed use,
that's,
CMU.
yeah,
What'd you say, Greg?
A lot of cities will do CMU, commercial mixed use,
there you go.
and then it kind of implies a residential transition part to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
why would we not have it as a permitted use in C4?
I have no issue. I think it should be permitted in C3 and C4. And,
Conditional in 1 and 2?
yeah, the residential spaces.
That's the direction I was leaning.
They make it conditional that they have to smell like bacon or baked goods if they're gonna be in a residential area. It's the best.
Yeah, I think, so what you're saying is conditional on C1 and C2 and then permitted on C3 and C4, right? Yeah, I think
Does that make more sense?
that might have been an error actually in
Originally.
before, because there was been some confusion between C1 and C2 sometimes. And C1 is really along Broadway, the
Right.
transition zone there, so.
And C2 is just awkward.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Next, Greg.
So light industrial, manufacturing, assembly, that one's brought down from above. We can just,
We've already discussed that one.
yep, you've already discussed that one. But later in the table, you had light industrial that had conditional use for C2.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to consider combining those.
I have
we
no
can-
problem with that.
Yeah, I think we-
Manufacturing and assembly is a
And then we,
subcategory almost of
in
light.
C2, that stays conditional then.
So C2, C3s, and C4 all conditional,
But that's good.
and then we can get rid of that light industrial.
So what'd you say? We're crossing out light industrial?
Yeah,
So
and
it's
we're,
There's
just gonna
two
be-
lines of it.
Didn't we talk about this once before, earlier?
well, we talked about the one that's in red.
We were having discussions of what is light industrial, what is artisan industrial, what does that mean? And again, big, broad stroke conversation of how are these gonna be defined? And I think we decided the reason it's in red is we wanted Jeremy or Greg to find out what other people, like what definitions they would consider in that space, and then also to come back and revisit this after we go through the definitions.
Okay,
That's what I recall.
all right. But I think we're okay there for now, Jeremy, right? Move on,
Yeah.
and we're just really focusing on manufacturing and then assembly right here, right?
But it's part of light industrial / manufacturing and assembly. And we had already made it conditional in C3 and C4. And then below that, we had made it conditional in C2, so I have no problem with making it conditional in C2 through C4.
Yeah.
Okay,
Think?
I mean,
It gives us a chance to look at it. and the neighbors.
You know how I feel about it. Do I have to say it out loud? I think we should be permitted, but.
I can hear you.
I was gonna say, I see these two just looking at me waiting, like. Yeah, in my eyes, like, again, it's in the commercial districts, and I think it will depend for me once we have definitions. Like, I don't wanna make a decision now on this. I wanna see how it's defined.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, Jeremy,
Vehicle sales, repairs, and services.
You know, the reason why we made it permitted in C4 is
So-
because that's an existing use.
did you have something, Jeremy?
Yeah, I was just going to, sorry, I was working on pulling up the current zoning regulations, definitions. So there is a definition for light industrial in the current zoning regulations. It says the manufacturing, fabricating, or casting of individual components of a larger unit or complete unit. All such processing must occur indoors or would not typically generate noise, vibration, smoke, dust, odor, or odor detectable at the property boundary line. That's the current definition.
But it doesn't mention traffic.
No, I mean, it just says doesn't typically or would not typically generate noise, vibration, smoke. So, I mean, it's essentially supposed to be a minor industrial process where everything is conducted indoors and there's no external impacts, so to speak, right, to adjacent landowners. Versus regular industrial says land uses that process, manufacture, assemble, package, treat, or fabricate materials and products from previously manufactured materials or from raw materials, usually for the mass sale to wholesalers or other industrial uses. Manufacturing and assembly definition is establishments or businesses that engage in the on-site production, processing, or assembling of goods, generally requiring truck delivery of products and materials and the use of tools and equipment.
So light industrial manufacturing and assembly to me sound very different. And they
Yeah.
should probably have their own.
Each one break it out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. Just.
Yeah, I would, I think
You want a lot of
manufacturing.
that to see.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Jeremy?
I think manufacturing and assembly is a bigger, it appears to me based on the definition, it's a bigger impact. It's more of a larger type. I would almost lump that more into an industrial use definite, like the industrial definition rather than light industrial. Like I feel like industrial and manufacturing assembly kind of go together.
So light industrial and industrial could have their own.
Yeah, so yep, yeah, there you go. So you could do that. Yep.
So, and I think the big difference that when describing those and when we go to do the definitions, I think we could even have light industrial / manufacturing and assembly, like, I don't know, I feel like manufacturing and assembly could still fit into industrial, like light industrial, but there's a light version of manufacturing and assembly. It's where you have a small operation versus one that requires lots of big trucks and noise and raw materials and storage. Like, I think it's a capacity piece.
The question really is, are they going to be allowed as a conditional use or permitted use in different zones, or are they going to be identical
I mean, to me,
in all the zones?
I would say it would be permitted for the light uses, because again, they don't seem to have a big impact on the neighbors. Whereas the heavier uses, that's where you're going to see more of an impact, and that's where it should be conditional if we're going with the theory of neighbors should have the opportunity to know what's going on, and then to the ability to look at it and try and tamper back that impact.
Probably my concern is more traffic for dropping off parts and
Right.
picking up parts. And actually, both light industrial and manufacturing and assembly are going to have somewhat of the same traffic impacts on a neighborhood.
I don't necessarily think that would be true, because it really does depend on the type of business and what they're manufacturing
Yeah.
and the scale. So I
Yeah.
think if you were to put that limiter in the definition or within that section to where it's like you can have, like, estimated traffic is to be below X, or estimated traffic is to be above X, like you are expected to receive deliveries in small vehicles.
Once a
vers-
week, or-
Yeah, versus like big semi trucks, you know, like.
And
Would
so
be,
that's in
or
the
if you be,
definition.
receiving packaging or deliveries the same as a residential home would.
Like a UPS.
Yeah, UPS, or like
Or
the
FedEx.
occasional, you might get the low semi to drop off, like the same way that you would with anything else.
And I
To
think,
where it wouldn't be any different impact than it would be from any other neighbor.
that's kind of where I was going, is the traffic pattern.
Yep.
But maybe that light industrial could be served by that as part of the definition.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, that means, like, I would have that permitted in certain spaces. If it's not gonna have that same impact, that would be the difference to me.
And-
Otherwise, it's all just industrial and everything's conditional. But I personally think that having some things permitted is a good idea, because again, it does encourage artisan growth.
So, could you, I think what you're suggesting, especially C3 North and South,
Mm-hmm.
those should both be permitted for both categories.
I would think so, but
Yeah.
honestly, I don't mind it being conditional for the heavier use categories either.
Okay,
Because we don't necessarily want something that's gonna be a nuisance.
no,
And it'd be good to be able to have that, and especially considering the direction of the urban renewal district and the north and south, and wanting to highlight and focus on view shed and kind of that aesthetic.
right.
I think it's important that you do have the ability to have that review and provide conditions to make sure that it is aesthetically pleasing in the gateways and the entrance.
So then just make them both conditional in the same 4 areas.
Well, again, I think it would be permitted in C4 and C1 and C2 for the light. And then for the heavy, it would be conditional throughout.
So you're proposing light industrial be a permitted use from C1 through C4,
Mhm.
and conditional in C2 through C4.
So C1 through C2 and C4 permitted, and conditional in C3 north and C3 south,
For light.
light. Or, and honestly, I would say just permitted throughout for light, but
That's kind of
then,
where I was going.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then for heavy, have it conditional throughout. That makes more sense. I had to say things out loud.
Yeah.
I think for now, we should leave it all conditional until we get a sense of looking at the definition.
Definition.
Yeah.
Because, again, C1 is along Broadway, it's basically adjacent to our downtown, so for me to be comfortable without taking that out of conditional use, I'd really like to see what we mean in terms of scale for light industrial. And so I think for now, at least that's kind of what my thinking is. But
Greg, can you at least make a note, like, kind of recapping what we want to know before we, just so that way we know what to discuss in 6 months when we get back to this?
this, especially in C1,
Yeah.
which is primarily residential with a mix.
I mean,
I mean,
C1 is,
in order for, I guess what I look at, if it's permitted, the neighbors are never going to know that somebody's coming in to,
except for they're living in C1.
what's that?
They live in C1.
Yeah.
So they know that the potential is there.
Well, they're still primarily almost exclusively residential.
Yeah.
And again, I don't necessarily mind it being conditional there, but like, again, I also think of that Main Street, and I think it's a little bit narrow-sighted to not consider that that section there off Broadway could adapt and change over time. Again, we have some sections through there that are vacant, and
Mm.
it could be good opportunities for folks that are doing, and again, for light industrial, something that's minimal to no impact to neighbors besides the impact you would have from neighbors already. I just don't see the concern as much. I can absolutely see that for the heavier industrial, things that would be creating more traffic, more noise, more nuisance. But for something that's literally gonna be operating probably less of a nuisance than the house next to you, you're not gonna have someone living there 24 hours, they go home at 5. Like, I don't know, that's my 2 cents on it.
What's other people's thoughts?
Well, I think the definition is really the key here. If we can define light industrial as Jeremy defined it, where it's really kept completely within a building, and then we address part of that as the amount of traffic that it generates,
Mhm.
then I'd be leaning more towards permitted all the way across the board in the commercial zones. If in fact that ends up being the definition.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways we could do it. We could either amend the definition for light industrial to essentially put add an additional item to the list saying, do not increase traffic by a certain amount. Or we could add in the district specific regulations below this table, we could add a light industrial section and put sidebars on it for different districts even, right? So you
Okay.
you would not necessarily need to change the definition in the back, then you would just put sidebars. So say C1, right? If you wanted more sidebars or more restrictions on light industrial, you could put as many restrictions on that as you want. You could say you capped it at a number of employees. You could say, certain number of trips per day. There's all sorts of things we could do within the district specific regulations for light industrial.
Jeremy, this is Perry. I mean, I guess I like everything you just said. I would add one other thing. I mean, I think parking is a concern, especially C1. You start putting businesses that have very many customers, and that's already, that's mostly residential already, and parking's, it's pretty tight along Broadway. So, but then you're really limited to the size of anything you can do if you start adding parking requirements, so.
Well, I mean, that might be the reason to restrict a number of employees in C1, right? To say five employees or something, because then you're essentially saying, well, I mean, you're restricting parking as well because you can only have 5 employees or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever we decide that. But Greg and I can look at that a little bit more, and come back with some recommendations as we get down into those district specific standards. Or, I mean, if we're fine with just, I mean, like I said, the other way to do it is we could just update the definition that would just be the same across the board for all districts. So if we just wanted to say, the current definition says everything has to be enclosed in a building, and essentially you can't have any impacts past the property boundaries, right? The only thing it doesn't really talk about is traffic. So if we wanted to add traffic to the definition to say, can't increase traffic by more than 100 trips a day or something, that's going to limit the number of employees. That's going to limit the number of customers, right? That's going to put a sidebar on all those things anyways. And then we don't have to have, I could see it both ways. Just, I think one way is if you want to treat it the same through all of the districts, then we update the definition. If you want to have different sidebars with different districts, then you would want to do that in the individual district standards, use standards, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we need to make a distinction between C1 and C2 because those are mixed residential commercial.
Both
And,
very different too.
Yeah.
and so, but the other thing we need to sort of keep in mind, I think we also had, I believe, a limit, some sort of a square footage limitation in our current zoning relative to what would trigger a conditional use versus a permitted. And maybe we need to take a look at that as well.
And we'll get into all that when we get into the specific district standards, that we have that all outlined below this table in the specific districts. We pulled all that out and down into standards that are specific to each district. So we can take a look at those as we get into each one of the districts.
Okay. So do we want to say conditional for now across all those districts, or do we want to just leave it blank as a reminder to come back to it?
I think we should, I don't know.
I think I'll remember to come back.
I've made a note as well, and I'm sure Jeremy has as well.
Yeah, it's keep it in red, and I think that's enough of a, hey, why is that red?
Yeah.
I would definitely make industrial manufacturing assembly conditional across all those districts.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I agree with that.
And maybe even you don't even allow that in C1. Maybe leave C1 with the dash. I don't see you putting.
No.
I would even say C2. Again, if it's large impact.
Because those are going to be those larger industrial type, processes that are going to have more impacts, more trucks, potentially noise and vibration, and that's going to be a lot more impactful use. So any districts that we don't want that in, I wouldn't even consider it a conditional use permit. I just not allow it.
Yeah, I would take it off C2.
Yeah. Do you want truck traffic back in there?
No, again, and those roads are fragile enough.
I think we need to kind of keep in mind what we mean by commercial. When we set up C1 and C2, when we talk about commercial, the thought behind that wasn't to allow manufacturing or industrial uses within those zones. It was to provide flexibility for mixed residential with offices, professional offices, maybe restaurants.
Something light.
Yeah, those kinds of commercial activities. So I think it's important to keep a distinction between that kind of commercial activity and light industrial and manufacturing. And we need to also I think, to kind of look at the context. It's, C1 is our community entrance transition zone.
Mm-hmm.
It is basically Broadway. And we've got a lot of direction in our growth policy about maintaining historical look of the downtown and Broadway, as even in our in our community entrance zones, similar types of direction. So I think those are other things we need to sort of keep in mind, because if we just kind of look at this individually, piecemeal, we end up cutting things up and we lose in context back to the growth policy as well, I think. So
Yeah, I do feel like this is done a little bit in reverse, because again,
Yeah.
we're going to end up coming back to this whole table and likely changing a substantial amount.
Especially once we see the definitions.
Yeah, once we start doing definitions and once we start breaking into the districts and writing those districts out specific to the growth policy, that's going to change what happens within.
Mhm.
What Jeff was just saying, C1 has no provision for light industrial. It says, the intent of the district is to provide a buffer between the central business district and residential, and is intended to minimize conflicts between commercial and residential neighborhoods. C1 district promotes the continued occupancy and rehabilitation of existing structures by allowing residential structures to be converted to low-intensity commercial uses such as professional offices and art galleries. So I think in staying with C1, and we don't want either of those in C1. And C2 does get into,
C2 is weird.
it is, but it
is
does
very
permit, currently permits industrial manufacturing and assembly structures, but not exceeding 5,000 square feet.
Small.
Yeah. And I think realistically, we're gonna see that throughout town. Like, we don't want big. It's going to be small structures, and the only place that we can really have the opportunity to do big is C3 North and C3 South, but it's just gotta be extremely thoughtful for what big is and how it's done. Not Mall of America, but, you know,
Probably not.
probably not. I would, no.
Well, the point of having conditional use, it gives the community the opportunity to weigh in terms of a proposal. When it's permitted, the community has no opportunity to weigh in and have their input. So to me, that's a big major distinction in terms of, that's a major change when you go from conditional use to permitted use. And if you want to get the community upset, do things without informing them.
Oh, very aware.
So just, I don't know, can you add to that, Jeremy, in terms of this conditional use versus permitted? If we go across the board with permitted uses on a lot of these, that basically cuts out any sort of community review any review by the community, right?
That is correct. Yep. So, I mean, I think if you make it permitted, I think that's where the district specific standards for specific uses comes in to be very important for staff, because then we have something to review against. So if you want to make it permitted, then I would suggest we put sidebars in there, right? So say you want to put light industrial as permitted in C3 and C4. Then I think under those C3 and C4 districts, we have a light industrial section where we can put sidebars for that, which would restrict maybe building footprint, employees, traffic. We can put different restrictions in there. And that way staff has direction on what the planning board expects in those districts, right? If there's no sidebars and all we have is the definition to go by, then we really as staff have no way of restricting what they do, as long as they meet the definition, right? And they meet up the other requirements like setbacks and parking and all that stuff. So, yeah. So I think but then anything that's conditional comes to the planning board. Now, again, I still think the sidebars are important with conditional use permits because the planning board also needs sidebars, right? So just as staff does, the planning board needs to be able to review an application and make sure that it meets the restrictions that you want. But with a conditional use permit, the planning board can put additional conditions on that project. So if there's impacts of a proposed use that you see that need to be mitigated, then the planning board can put conditions on that. And that might be hours of operation, maybe lighting requirements, maybe traffic requirements, right? For truck traffic, restricting traffic operations to main streets and not side streets or something like that, right? There's a whole host of, I'm not going to list them all, but it allows the planning board with public input to put additional conditions on top of a zoning application.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. That's actually a good point too, because oftentimes when we've looked at conditional use reviews, we have identified additional conditions to be placed on that proposal to help mitigate the impacts, either impacts that haven't been foreseen, that have been brought up to us by the public during public comment period, or in a letter to the planning board, or other things that maybe haven't been thought of up to that point. So that, I guess the reason for going through this discussion, at least for me, is just to remind us what conditional uses are for and what their purpose and intent is. And I think And I do like the idea of having the sideboards written in, additional sideboards, better definitions, definitely, is part of our zoning code that can help both guide us and guide the city staff as well in terms, but, so,
I like having a list of additional considerations on these.
yeah.
Even though we usually come up with our own, but it's nice to have a list of
Yeah,
additional considerations.
I think it's better to have the list of additional considerations, because one, I think it's looking from it from the other side of somebody who's wanting to come in and do a development. I think it's useful for them to understand what they can expect.
That we're also gonna consider these items.
Yeah, and I think it's, that way they can plan for it, and again, it doesn't become, being able to set clear expectations, I think, is the most important part of this, and that's why conditional use I tend to fight back on, is because I think that it creates a level of uncertainty for folks that are coming within that area trying to do things, and when we go through and the majority of items are conditional use, it's not super inviting for people that want to come in and start their small businesses, what have you. So that I will play that side of that coin.
so are we gonna come back to this, or are we gonna leave?
Yeah, we're gonna come back after we
Carrie's
get
good
it.
at moving it along.
No, I just,
Where are we
I-
on
there's-
it? Yeah.
I just think for industrial manufacturing assembly, that it should be C3 north and south and nowhere else. I don't think it fits in C4, period.
Mm-mm.
And, mostly for aesthetics and just level of activity, so.
And just
Oh,
spatial, like, where, like how?
Well, we also have to bear in mind, you know, when we have a 5,000-foot restriction as a conditional use, if you go around the older parts of town, most of those lots aren't 5,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
But C4 does include Hauser on the other side.
I realize that, but you can't, then we get to go in and start really narrowing it down.
Yeah.
It's okay on Hauser, but not on Broadway, and that you're still looking at tiny parcels,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have, or you have somebody coming and buying
You have a whole
multiple.
city block.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah, and then that comes the question, is that really where we want to have industrial use in the
No.
core town? Or is that better suited for
Our
housing?
community entrance.
So I think those are all things that we kind of need to sort of,
yeah.
I mean, that, to me, when we go through this table, just item by item without referring back to the intent of the zoning or referring back to the growth policy, we kind of lose that connectivity.
Yes.
So I think we need to kind of keep that in mind as we go forward. Let's move on.
Okay, I'm all for it.
The vehicle sales, repair, and service, I see that we have it permitted in C4 because it is existing, but I don't think it's an appropriate place for it at all.
The only pushback I'll have on that is there was conversation of, during the Main Street program, like having things that bring you downtown besides tourism. So like having activities, whether that's coming down and getting my windshield fixed or the damage done at the shop there where they have that, we have a little lot. I don't know, that would be my only pushback, but again, I also don't mind it being conditional in C4.
It'd be a nice resort tax.
I don't think we want a car lot on Broadway. And,
Only if it's a really cool car lot.
yeah, here we have the list. of
Classic
conditions.
cars, yeah.
Classic cars.
I don't think we're on any auto, other than used cars, I don't think we're on anybody's list to put a Ford or Chevy
No.
dealership back again.
No,
So
We don't
my-
have those
my-
cars.
especially in
that.
C4. I just don't,
Yeah,
I think that we did it only because it's existing,
yep.
and that's the wrong reason to do it. So then the question is, do we really want vehicle sales, service, and repair in our downtown C4?
And if the existing sell, then they're grandfathered in,
Exactly.
so.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the current
No,
people, but in the future, we're trying to groom this downtown.
so you're saying take the P and make it a dash.
That's what I would propose.
So the only thing I would say is if you have a current vehicle sales or vehicle repair place, you know, those there are very specific types of buildings and uses on a parcel. And if say typically grandfathering works, the way it works is as long as the use stays in that use, it's grandfathered in. As soon as somebody discontinues use, so say somebody decides that they're going to retire and they close up shop and that use discontinues for a certain amount of time, that grandfathering goes away. Then whatever use goes in that space next has to meet zoning. So I guess my question is what it would make maybe more sense to do it as conditional, because what would somebody use that space for as a next use potentially? I'm just throwing out.
To give you an idea, Jeremy, what we're talking about is the actual repair shop is on Hauser, but they also own the vacant lot on Broadway where they park their cars from time to time. So it's that particular lot that I'm more concerned with than the repair shop that's on Hauser that's already there.
But it can be repurposed too. Bone Daddy's was one.
I'm just, and if you don't want
Part
it,
of
that's
it's a repair shop.
Yeah.
Would you,
And I'm okay with making it
Yeah.
conditional, just I don't
Yeah.
not permitted.
Yeah.
Not permitted, yeah.
I'm good with conditional.
I'm good either way.
How do you feel, Jeff?
yeah, I think, yeah, either to take it out or make it conditional. I could go either way on that one, given, yeah, we probably may want to clarify again whether we want that kind of a business to face Broadway versus, but yeah. All right, next.
Schools?
Oh, man.
No, not
Just
that.
get rid of them everywhere.
Oh,
I
that's
find
not
it
on
interesting
mine.
that they're
I thought that was-
conditional.
I thought we did that.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. What's the purpose for making the school conditional use, especially on a public parcel, like especially P1, P2? Why would that just be permitted?
Yeah.
Well, I thought one was city park and the other one was government. P1 was. I gotta go scroll down.
P1 is, well, yeah,
P1P is park, but this is one thing that we wanted to change,
Right.
because P1P is park and P1 is public use.
We talked about.
Yep, we had this conversation. And then P2, I want to say, is government or school.
Here's the question, what's the definition of school? I know we're talking about public schools, but what is the true definition of school that we have in our zoning?
Hold on a second, and I will tell you. I can find it.
101.
Smaller school.
There's all sorts of schools, yeah.
Exactly.
So P2 is specifically schools in our existing zoning.
P2 is specific, there's definitely conditional in there, let's.
And, P1,
We don't have it.
If they're teaching them what we want them to.
public and semi-public serve the public health, safety, and general welfare, implement the Red Lodge growth policy, and protect critical natural resources. So various public buildings, parks, and recreational facilities and open spaces. This zoning district further intends to minimize incompatibility between public uses and neighboring private uses. So no mention of schools in P1.
Well, in this part here, allowed uses says schools, and P2 says schools as an allowed use. Well, they're both under conditional though.
Are you looking at I'm talking about the specific language as you get down,
You get into it. Yeah.
get into it.
I was just looking that we have P1 and P2 schools as conditional. And I can't say I know the logic in that.
Yeah, we don't really have a definition for school in the zoning. All I see is under public facilities, it lists infrastructure and associated improvements, including water, wastewater, fire protection, and public schools, regional parks and streets. That's under the definition for public facilities. The rest
Yeah.
of the references have to do with daycare.
A lot of dates.
So,
But
Jeremy, I'm looking at line 100 and 101, and public district standards and district specific standards in the language down below where we currently are. And that's where I got what I read. So I have a suggestion. Maybe we make P2 permitted, but when we go back and review the map, we stipulate the P2s which are appropriate. You know, we pre-choose that, and then
Where the current schools are.
where the current schools are and room for expansion. I don't know, the school district might like room for future schools, but I'm not sure why, but.
It might be good to talk to the school district about
Yeah.
it too. And I mean, I think about growth, and again, it's not like schools down in town are gonna last forever.
No,
They might need to relocate,
Yeah.
build,
I don't disagree with that, but,
and someone might wanna put in a private school, or again, just different types of schools, like adult education and
mhm.
college. We might get
Well,
a community college.
and keep in mind, if the school district finds a parcel that they want to build a new school on somewhere in town, they can always come to the city and ask for rezoning to allow for, to a P2 or something like that would allow for a school to be built, right? So that's
Sure.
kind of what the rezoning process would almost be for, would be
That's true.
to allow that. That's what we typically see in situations. Because they would need a large area. I mean, a school needs a fairly big parcel to build on, so.
So with school, would private education centers, or would that be a different definition then?
I don't think so.
Traffic school? I just think about, do we want to have two different, is it public schools and then private, or, because again, I can see, the public schools and the high school needs a ton of space, but an adult learning facility does not.
Right now, everything out around the high school, including the park, is all zone P1P,
Yes,
and that includes the high school. So,
which isn't on our list.
which is and there's just not a lot of P2 on here.
Yeah.
And then over the newer Roosevelt School is on there, and that's basically the only P2 that's on the map. So,
Yeah, I'm more worried about what's happening in the C1, C2, C3, if we want to keep that conditional for smaller educational facilities. That's what I'm
I
referring
think we
to.
need to break down the definition, because
Yeah.
the daycare on Cooper and
6.
Sixth, is that daycare, is that school? Could be either,
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference between commercial and private too, right? Or public?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go, that's your distinction right there as well.
So.
Well,
so-
And daycare is defined differently than a school. That's a different.
Well, it's really called, is it a Montessori school?
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of kids.
Yeah, it's a
That's daycare.
Montessori.
It's a Montessori school, Jeremy.
Why don't we make P1 and P2 as permitted for schools and conditional in all the other commercial zones?
For me.
Yeah, that's good,
So just get it down there?
yeah.
Mhm.
How's that sound? Yeah. Wheels are turning.
I like the idea of cleaning up the P2 zoning
Yeah.
to where it's really talks about the current schools.
Mhm.
And then the P1, I guess, my hesitation there on permitting that, because that includes our parks, right?
Yeah,
So
and you already know what that.
we know
Yeah.
what kind of interest is generated with our parks.
And the Silver Strike,
What?
and
And the
Silver
Silver
Strike.
That'd be a great spot for a school.
Well, you look at the existing Roosevelt, there's just not very many parcels in town
Yeah,
that are of a large, and if they wanted to build a new school, your options, you can't turn that down and rebuild a new school during the summer.
you could do it at Blue Pine.
Yeah,
But,
you'd have
and
to have,
then,
yeah, those options, so.
yeah,
But
there's,
then they come back and ask us to have a zoning.
right, and then, yeah, so again, so I don't have an issue with,
I don't think Roosevelt is even public anymore.
Not the old Roosevelt,
No.
the
the
new,
new one is.
the existing,
They use the
Yeah.
same.
elementary,
Oh.
middle school,
They
still
use
called
Oh,
the
the middle
same
schools,
name.
okay,
Um,
all right.
Yeah, and then like the hospital, and there's places where it could go, and it could happen.
Mhm.
But again, I think that would be a bigger conversation that's not necessarily someone coming in. I'm thinking more of the private entities.
We also have things like, the dance studio. There's some ways you can set up a school.
Yep.
Yeah,
And martial arts,
And that was the other one I
Yoga.
was thinking about.
Mhm.
so
Those
maybe
are
maybe we should
all
break it into public and
Yeah,
commercial.
Commercial.
Yeah.
public and private. I think 'cause private could still handle commercial. I don't know. I think that's worth looking into. I'm sure that there's examples of other definitions for this.
I have to ask Jeremy on that one.
but by breaking them into public and private, that gives us a chance for dance schools and the martial arts studio and the yoga, which is one of the things
Well,
on my list. is-
Or even government versus, so that would be your public is your government,
Well-
so.
This might be, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if it would be appropriate to invite Brian in to address this later, because I get kind of confused, because I know there's change of use issues. And if somebody wanted to take a building and make it into, let's say, a dance studio, it alters things.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose that actually that part of the conversation is planning, where Brian would come in, would be as a role of building inspector, and if it changed the building codes. And Jeremy, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my thinking is that this is as you described it, as I understood it, is in fact planning, planners, planning board.
Right.
I mean, we can, Jeremy and Brian speak frequently, can get that input, but Jeremy,
I like-
is that probably bring building inspector in?
Yeah, I mean, Brian obviously dabbles in a little bit of the planning stuff, and we work together on if people come in with questions, but yes, change of use is a zoning planning issue versus a building permit issue. I guess I like the idea of splitting this into two rows, one called public school and one called private schools, and allowing leaving the public school line as we have it, and then changing the private school line to conditional use in the commercial districts and not permitted on the public zone lots.
Like that.
That makes sense.
That way, I think that does a couple of things. That addresses the question of a change of use and whether or not we can allow a private school or not in the commercial district if somebody wants to do a change of use. This basically answers that question, because now we can say, oh yeah, the district standards say you can do a private school. You just have to go through the conditional use permit process with the planning board. And so I think that's important to have it as conditional use, because depending on the type of school, there could be a lot of traffic, a lot of, during certain times, right? And so You know, if it's a mixed martial arts school, you know, they're probably going to be operating more in the evenings, you know, outside of the regular work schedule during the day. But if it's you know, an adult education school, you know, they're probably going to be operating during the day. You know, so every different kind of school that might fit in that category could have different impacts just depending on what it is, right? And then I think
And I'm
it would
kind
be
of,
important for us to add definitions to the back of the zoning regulations for each one of these, public school and private school.
and then the question is, should the private schools be a conditional use in the C1? It might be a good use for some of that land coming in from 19th Street,
Yeah,
because there's smaller buildings,
Yep.
homes that could be converted to yoga studios or a dance studio.
I know that there's a gym in the building that we rent.
Yeah.
Like then they do classes and stuff, so.
Yeah,
so maybe conditional in C1 through,
and C1 through C4.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my idea. It would make C1 more usable as well.
Mhm.
And again, it's really easy to use that building, the pre-existing
Mhm.
building and the aesthetic.
Yeah.
I like
Okay,
it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I just said I like it.
But do you love it?
So,
We'll have to
That's a
set these out.
That's a very strong word. I don't think we're there yet. We'll get there.
so the,
We're just not there yet.
the only question I still have is having the P permitted in this P1 zone, if that includes basically the rest of city property.
I think we need to clean it up and have one be parks and those, and the other government buildings or maybe make one parks and one buildings, you know, I don't know, that just
So
kind of weird.
what you're suggesting is to have a zone that's strictly for parks, and then the other is other sort of government buildings.
I think we could break it up either way.
I like
That's just a thought.
I like public
It
parks.
gets kind of, it's a little mixed up as it currently is.
Well, in the P1 that I see is, you know, Lions Park, Silver Strike, and then it goes to the fire station and the lot that they own that's behind it. And that's P1.
Yeah.
It's very, the map needs some adjustment. We
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that.
there's the high schools out there and also in P1P.
P1P, that doesn't exist,
And
yeah.
there's also the wildlife sanctuary there, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand, we could just have public land, and then we could have recreational, like a public recreation, a PR and a,
Yeah, I'm open to ideas, but right now it's kind of weird.
I think,
here for it.
Isn't the airport also P1?
P1A.
Okay, so that,
That's an overlay.
all right.
There's two parts. There's an overlay which extends beyond the boundaries of
Beyond
the
it.
airport because
Right.
it impacts building heights.
Oh, sure,
That's
sure.
the safety
Yeah,
overlay.
yeah.
But we're obviously gonna have to fix that as well. So there are a lot of changes that we're gonna have to make to these maps.
So what do you think, Jeremy, in terms of sort of what I think I've heard is sort of for P1, sort of breaking that out a little bit more in terms of what that entails, differentiating public parks from public buildings.
Yeah, I mean, we can always put sidebars in the district standards for P1, right? That, you know, parks are, you know, we could put some language in there that saying that parks are, you know, not to be used for anything other than recreational purposes, or something like that. I think, I think I find it's probably not as big as issue as you think it might be, especially for a school, because in order for a school to be built on parkland, there would have to be some agreement between the city council and the school district, either leasing the land or selling the land to the district for a school. And so that
Right.
would be way before you even get to the zoning part, right? So if the city council is like, no, this is a park, we're not going to sell this to the district, school district for a school, then it's a moot point. So I don't know, it feels like maybe we're making a bigger issue out of park space being used for school than it might actually be, but we could certainly also put sidebars in the specific district standards that says, you know, existing or public park spaces are not to be used for anything other than parks and recreation or something.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, maybe we just need a P, for public in parks, just, it's all.
Yeah, like, that's kind of my thought, is not so much just talking about schools, but more in general, we have a place for recreation and we have a place for public use. Because that's the thing, it's not just public buildings, it's also public use, like, this
Right.
is where we keep the gravel, this is where we store the sheds, like. Huge problem.
I mean, yeah, when we dive into the zoning map and we want to make those changes, then we'll probably have to come back to this chapter and these tables, but I mean, that would be the simplest way to do it. If you want to protect parks, just make it the separate park zoning district that basically the only use allowed is public park and recreation, and then accessory uses for garages and sheds. And that's it. That's all you have.
That sounds good.
That sounds like we're probably gonna need to take a look at how these are defined anyway.
Yeah, we
Come-
know we're gonna have to come back to
Come
this,
back.
once we have definitions and look at the zoning map and come back again.
All right, so let's move on.
From the healthcare facility. Right now is permitted in C3N, C3S, C4, and P1.
I think right away we have to take out P1.
For a public space? I mean, there's,
Healthcare facility
yeah, there's, I mean,
would
if you,
be on public land.
I mean, you have the community, like the county health offices. Would that count for healthcare? Again, back to definition.
I would think that's more definitional. That's part of county services, right? Part of
Right.
county.
Yep.
I would say probably falls more under governmental buildings and facilities than probably healthcare. I
Okay.
think health facilities are like health clinics and hospitals, that sort of thing, private. But let me see if we have a definition. We do not.
Out of curiosity, there are parcels in the city limits that are owned by the county,
Mhm.
and I guess we still have zoning control over those areas.
Well, not really.
Yeah,
We
kind of where I'm going.
statute says that you can zone the property, but another government entity does not have to follow that. And I have to dig up the exact MCA language, but I've dealt with this in the past. In East Helena, we had some property that was owned by Lewis and Clark County, and they wanted to put some stuff, or they wanted to do some things on it that the city did not necessarily want. They ended up de-annexing. They could have built it anyways. They ended up de-annexing the properties. That's how they went about it. But we like to try to get them to meet the zoning requirements, but their statute does not require them to meet local zoning requirements.
They're bigger than you.
It looks like right now we have the county building and that health facility as P1.
I know that's probably why it's permitted under P1, which
Is why it's there, because it's an
is
existing
existing
use,
use.
but
Right.
it's still weird.
It is,
And then we're gonna have Cedarwood
which is gonna be whatever,
demolished and,
county offices.
yeah,
Yep.
and so again,
I don't have an issue with it being there, like, I think more so it's gonna come into the definition of that district, like, if we wanted to put something, like, if government wanted to put something in and have a public health facility there, they could, but that would be the parameters put into P1. That's the guardrails in P1. So it's permitted and they don't have to go through conditional use to get a healthcare facility put in. But again, at the end of the day, like, I don't see if someone were to come up here with a conditional use, be like, hey, we wanna put up actually, no, I could see that being a big problem. If it was a government-ran facility and say it's an abortion clinic,
Right.
that could be really problematic if it came to a council or a planning board meeting. So even if, I think in terms of the P1 and having it permitted, the only issue is like, okay, like, you put that in the district definitions that this is only permitted for public ran offices or facilities versus private entities.
city or county.
Yep, city or county.
What do you think about that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that's appropriate. I mean, again, I think it kind of goes to the school discussion a little bit too, right? Because, you know, if a healthcare facility wants to, you know, go on a government-owned lot, they're going to have to lease that space and go through those appropriate channels to either lease it or buy it before they could do it anyways. So if it's city-owned property, you know, the city council is going to kind of vet that at that point, or even the county, right?
Yeah, so basically, it's gonna come to the planning board at the end of the process rather than the beginning.
Mhm.
And that process is gonna involve a lot of public involvement
Long before it gets.
long before it comes to the planning board, so if it goes through that process, then, yeah. Okay.
So we're just
So
gonna leave it permitted.
Just for reference, I pulled up the language on agencies and local zoning. And it says, whenever an agency proposes to use public land contrary to local zoning regulations, a public hearing must be held and the agency shall attend the public hearing. The local governing body shall hold a hearing within 30 days of the date the agency gives notice to the local body of its intent to develop land contrary to local zoning regulations. It just, so that what that means is zoning code or MCA only allows us to hold a public hearing. We cannot deny that what they want to do with it, right? It just says, hey, okay, if you want to do something that's different in our zoning, we need to hold a public hearing and you need to hear what the public has to say about it. And then maybe that agency changes their mind if there's a lot of public pushback. I don't know, but we don't have the authority essentially to deny anything. We just have to hold a public hearing.
Interesting.
Yeah, I run into this too with it's very similar to conservation easements in counties. Counties actually have no authority to review or to approve or deny conservation easements, but we're required by state law to review conservation easements and provide comment. But we cannot approve or deny them. It's kind of weird.
They're just gonna notify us.
I've heard of
Basically,
something
it's
that
like a notification process. Like, here, this is what we're doing. You can't tell us no, but here's what we're doing.
It's polite. So I have healthcare facility under C3, C4, and P1. Is that where we left it?
I also don't have an issue with it being conditional in C1 and 2. Small dentist office.
Well, those are professional. I was gonna ask that question. How do you
Professional
make a
offices.
distinction between a medical office and like a dental office, eye doctor, physician's office, and a healthcare facility? In my mind, healthcare facility implies something more like what St. Vincent's Intermountain has down by the dollar store.
Sure.
And I mean, if it's like that, do you really want that in C4? You know, I guess that, to me, the definition makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Do we have a definition, Jeremy, for healthcare facility currently, or is that something we need to clarify along the lines of what Perry is suggesting? Making a distinction between medical offices, dental offices versus a larger facility.
Yeah, we don't have a definition of healthcare facility, but if you look at C1 and C2, we have permitted uses for medical office. So
Yeah.
we have a different land use category for what's being described as like a dental office, in that sort of thing is considered medical office. So a healthcare facility would be like a urgent care clinic or a hospital, right? That sort of facility versus, you know, a dentist or orthodontist would be considered a medical office use.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, you know, C3 north and south are probably the best locations for that.
Yep.
Not
And
necessarily downtown.
And under C1, we currently have that capped at basically, it says, structures shall not exceed 5,000 square feet floor area. So we do have a cap, you know, that's talking about those sidebars, right? Of, you know, how big those medical professional office structures can be.
So yeah, I think we just do need to have an actual definition for healthcare facility. That'd be good. But other than that, that's fine with me. And I'm good with getting rid of it in C4.
And P1 and just call it C3?
I don't mind it in P1. Like, just for emergencies. You never know. We might have an epidemic in 30 years that requires we need a massive facility.
Yeah.
Down
Civic
there,
Center might
Silver
turn into a
Strike?
hospital.
That's Silver Strike?
Silver Strike would be, I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen people basically use it as a nursing home, so.
Are we gonna leave?
I think we might make that one conditional.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question is, do we need it?
Yeah, but.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. There was something I just heard Jeremy say when he was describing something about that if it was a 5,000 foot, it triggered a conditional use. In my mind, I'm remembering, and it seemed to me like we have another place where it's 2,000 foot that triggers a conditional use only if it's commercial, not if it's residential. Right. Is that a specific zone, or why? Is that in that same place where there's that 5,000, and is that a conflict in which one rules?
That's the C4, Dave, I think you're talking about, where that 2,000 square foot comes in.
So that's just in a different area then.
Yeah, what I was describing in C1, it restricts office, retail, restaurants, medical and professional office structures shall not exceed 5,000 square feet. So that's all I was saying. We have that sidebar in C1 that requires that.
That might almost affect healthcare facilities just because of its size, it's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like a hospital is going to be way bigger than 5,000 square feet, right?
It would conditional based on the size.
Thank you.
It does look like though, in all the commercial districts, the 2,000 square foot conditional use trigger that you were just talking about, it's in all commercial districts.
So it's in all commercial, again, if there's a
Yes,
2,000
yeah.
there, 5.
Yeah, I just noticed that too, but that is only if you're expanding. So allowed commercially, right? I think that's propose to construct or expand gross floor area. Oh no, construct or expand. So yeah, it is. If you're constructing over 2,000 square feet, you automatically have to, and we'll review these requirements as we get past this table. So we can make adjustments to this if the board feels like that's too restrictive. But basically right now in all the commercial districts, thanks Greg, I for some reason, I've only talked to Brian about it in C4. So for some reason I had it in my head, it was just C4, but,
My point was just that 5,000 sounds superfluous if the 2,000 stays, or if that's,
Right.
so.
But, yeah, the intent was to have some flexibility for allowing something smaller, at least within the community entrances, at least what I remember some of our past discussions. Because the board at the time was comfortable with facilities or buildings that are up to 2,000 feet. Once you go across that threshold, then you start getting into traffic issues and other ancillary issues. So that's the rationale for the 2,000 feet. And that maybe should be the same for medical facilities in the C1 is rather than 5,000 square feet, maybe it should be 2,000 there as well.
Well, in the language in what Greg sent out is shall not exceed 5,000. That doesn't trigger conditional use, it just can't be larger than 5,000 square feet.
So 2,000 triggers the conditional use, everything between.
You're right.
One thing just for consideration when we start to get into these sidebars, I've just been thinking about this whole employees, like you only have so many employees in the commercial areas and whatnot. Maybe we do consider occupancy versus like employee. Like, again, I don't want to get that specific of the bodies in the room, but more so like just how many bodies are in the room. Or, I mean, and the same with like vehicles, being able to facilitate up to amount of vehicles versus, or a minimum of so many vehicles, and having a percentage based off occupancy versus, oh, you can only have 6 employees. Like,
well, and
instead you have 20 people in the room.
And that's a good point because, businesses, if they're doing well, want to expand, right? And so part of expansion is new employees, or, to increase that expansion and trying to, I think what becomes problematic for the city is trying to police or enforce that, right? So they may have started out with 5 employees because that's what we said that was the restriction, but 5 years later, maybe they're up to 10 or 15 employees. How is the city, policing that, checking that, enforcing that? That becomes kind of onerous for the city and city staff to keep checking on those types of things. So that's a good point. We want to be careful not to make more work for staff too, in trying to enforce violations or regulations. So.
And just to follow up on that, Jeremy, I'm sure or Brian will for sure know, but is there, with occupancy rules, because all the commercial businesses in town are supposed to have their fire inspection and have a little sign on the wall that this is how many people can be here, maybe that's kind of the algorithm, or not the algorithm, but the tool that we can use for triggering like that conditional use is, well, at this much square footage, it creates this much occupancy, which we can then expect would be this much traffic. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe that's, again, I think about that in terms of spacing versus your traffic flow is gonna be more consistent with the amount of people you can actually physically fit in the room. 'Cause like, if you have a business, I don't think you should be told you can't have a business because it's commercial, even though realistically, based off that space and based off the occupancy allowed by code, you're only gonna be able to fit in 5 people.
Right.
And I mean, realistically, if that's compatible with the neighbor who has 8 kids, not that there's many of those in town, hopefully, but that's a lot of children. But, you know, that's something to consider too. And I think about that as a long-term property manager where, you know, more often than not, a long-term property, if you have a family of 4, there's potentially 4 cars in the driveway. Versus, yeah, or in the street. So again, I just want to be sure that we're really careful when we consider those types of guardrails and caps and considering traffic. Just to not, because it's a business doesn't necessarily mean it's creating traffic. And especially if it's a bad business. So anyway, I wanted to say it out loud before I forgot it in a few weeks, so.
Yeah, we can try to work with Brian on some language. When that we can add in that might just tie in with the building permit process potentially. I think that just warrants more discussion and we can have a discussion with Brian and see what he thinks and
Cool.
And we can look at some other zoning regulations too, around and just see what other places are potentially doing with, you know, some of these different, like the light industrial uses and industrial uses and see what they're doing in their regulations as far as restrictions. So.
Right, yeah. I just, especially with healthcare, I don't see it in C4. I just, and primarily, and yes, I realize it goes over on Hauser, but it's a parking issue.
Yeah, it's an emergency issue. If like
Yeah.
someone's coming in for a healthcare facility, like again, to me, the definition will make the difference for me. It's like, okay, is it something where we have medical office and that covers something, but if there's something that would be within a 2,000 square foot facility that is considered a healthcare facility versus a medical office, then I guess that's it. I just would like to see the definition of healthcare facility.
And you know, a healthcare facility under 2,000 square feet might only have 4 patient rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the number of patient rooms is the things we should be looking at,
Right.
because that's the number of people they can serve at one point.
Yep.
And that would involve traffic and parking.
That's exactly it. It's like you have a certain amount of space, you can only fit so many people.
Yeah.
I was just kind of looking at our current zoning, so it makes a distinction between medical offices, which are allowed in C1 and C2.
Right.
And healthcare facilities, it says that is a clinic hospital. So
Right.
it makes that, already we're making a distinction between medical office and a larger facility. So I think that's why it's permitted in C1 or in C3 through, I'm not sure why we have it for C4.
C4 is the one that doesn't make sense to me.
What's that?
I said C4 is the one that doesn't make sense to me.
I think it was there because of Cedarwood.
Because of
Well,
Hauser.
Cedarwood and then the mental health across the street
Yeah.
too, and
So again, we're doing it based on what's there as
What's there.
opposed to,
Right.
Also, Billings Clinic used to be on Hauser.
yes,
Right,
it did
right.
used to be on Hauser.
So, yeah, that C4 is probably more reflective of what used to
what it
be.
used to be, yeah.
But I mean,
But not what we can foresee.
and again, it's just kind of what I see as an example of that. Is, like, I could absolutely see medical offices, and not necessarily medical offices, but clinics, going into the old county building if they go to sell that. That could become a clinic space. And again, that's where I think that definition is going to be important.
So
What if we
That's
make
a good-
conditional
a good
use on
point.
C4?
Well, yeah, conditional
Cool.
C4, and basically the condition would be that it falls outside of the overlay,
Mm.
which those areas you're talking about over on Hauser are outside of the downtown.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Downtown overlay. And I think what we're trying to do is not have them on
Main Street.
Broadway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that, how do people feel about that?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I have C3 north and south as permitted, C4 is conditional, and for some reason I crossed off P1.
I think that's still up in the air. I
I think anything on P1 is gonna have to be conditional based upon the conversation with
yeah,
the city anyway.
yeah.
Okay, P1, conditional,
Cool.
done.
Did you get that, Greg's?
Yep.
P1 is conditional. All right.
As well as C4. Pharmacy should be easy.
Next one, moving on. How are we gonna finish? We're getting close.
Yeah, so pharmacy permitted in C3 and C4.
I think that's fine.
Okay,
Mini storage, just in C3 north right now.
No.
Conditional.
Yeah.
So, again, we already have one in C2,
Yeah.
but not that we wanna,
We don't like it.
I don't think you wanna perpetuate that.
no, I think I'm just, we don't want more.
I think it should be conditional, and I think it should be conditional in more areas to maybe spread it out to where people aren't targeting. Because, again, you can, but you have to put strict rules on it. You can make mini storage look good.
Yeah, oh, definitely, like the new one that they built north of town, that looks a lot better than
Yeah,
one on.
brighter than all get out, but.
Yeah, it is.
It
But I
looks like
mean-
a land.
And your lighting standards would.
Yeah, and I mean, I think of ones that I've seen in larger suburbs areas that are like the 4-story ones that are, and again, I just think of how we have pretty small houses within Red Lodge with minimal storage and most without garages, and for a long time, it was really hard to get mini
It still
storage.
is.
And for that reason, I think it should be conditional through at least C2 through C3 south, if not C1 through C4.
I think, I agree, C3 South, definitely,
Yeah, 'cause we got it down there too.
yeah.
So two and 3?
Yeah, 2 and 3, and again, I would like to see it in 1 and 4, but I'm not gonna lose sleep if it's not. Not willing to die on any hill tonight. I'm hungry.
It's been a long day.
Long week.
So I have conditional use in C2 and C3s.
Yes.
okay. Moving on.
It can't be.
Waste collection.
Exactly what is that?
I was gonna ask the same question. There's no definition for
Every
zoning waste
Yeah.
collection is.
And if we had a,
It's true.
Recycling center?
Recycling
is it
center.
recycling, and if we were to have a transfer station?
Yep.
Right.
So I think we need to be more specific about that and actually say waste transfer station / recycling center, if that's what we mean, or we need to add a definition, because waste collection can mean a lot of things.
Yep.
And to me, that's just wide open. And I think though the saving grace there doesn't say waste disposal. So I don't think we'd have to allow a landfill or anything, but,
Right.
waste collection, I kind of scratched my head on that one as well. I wasn't quite exactly sure what that meant.
What do other communities, how do they, kind of terminology do they use?
I think they just fit it on industrial use, is what I've seen. I've never seen a separate waste collection or recycling facility. It's typically just kind of underneath an industrial. So a lot of other local regulations have an industrial zoning district, right? That's separate. So anything that's industrial, like we have our industrial and manufacturing land use that we were just talking about, that would fall under an industrial zoning district, where it's actually identified where those types of uses would go. And so anything like this, waste transfer stations or recycling facilities would go within that industrial zoning district. That's kind of outside of, any residential or commercial areas. But absent an industrial district, because you guys don't have that, then I would be more specific and say if you want to allow a transfer station, recycling facility, let's and decide where you want, right?
That seems like that's more consistent with what we currently have. We have basically the recycling center that's on city property. If there is, at some point, we were going to have a transfer facility, most likely that would also happen on public land as well.
Yeah, I think it'd just be P1.
I cannot picture any place in the city limits that we could legitimately put a transfer station from the side. I don't know that you have to.
Do we have to zone for it?
I don't know. That's a planner question.
But yeah, that also makes, it also sort of makes sense in terms of how we want to prioritize our land use within the city, and we want to focus more on residential and commercial and some of the light manufacturing, but a transfer station most likely would be probably out in the county.
And we already go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to say, I don't see Red Lodge getting to be big enough that you would have a transfer station in town, like say the city of Helena does, right? The city of Helena has a transfer station in town, but it's run by the county within the city limits. And then everybody brings their garbage to that central location and it gets trucked out to the landfill by the county. In Red Lodge's case, you're small enough community that I see anything like that going outside of town, probably, more than likely. I don't see a transfer station being in town. I would say let's just say recycling facilities and leave it at that. And then if 10 years or 20 years from now, the county proposes doing a transfer station on a lot that they own in the city or something, or the city does, then you can always amend the zone. You can always do a text amendment in the zoning regulations to allow it as a conditional use or something like that. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I like that. But and that's part of the conversation, but the conditional in C3 North, on the map, the recycling center is actually in city owned. Mm-hmm. It really should be a P, whatever we decide, instead of.
I agree with that.
It currently shows it in C3 North on the map, so.
Yeah, what Jeremy was saying was, in terms of a transfer station, we probably wouldn't even entertain it within city.
Maybe out by the sewage.
It would be
the sewage plant.
And that'd be only if we annex.
We don't own that land.
Well, again, if we were to.
Why don't the county do the transfer?
Well, that was the gist of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I guess, if I'm not hearing everybody right, we would probably put a dash where the C is under C3 North, and then put a C under P1.
which is what we currently
It's
have
out there.
under waste collection. We just need to rename it.
And looks like we're renaming it recycling
Recycling.
facility.
Greg's ahead of us.
Trying to keep up.
All right, it's 10 after, or
20 after.
20 after, I mean.
Oh,
So what do we have left on the tables?
So this is,
Looks like we've kind of basically finished the land use piece, except that accessory land use by district.
The outdoor storage.
yeah, which you guys had decided to move outdoor storage to an accessory use with
that's why I said,
Right.
guardrails, that Jeremy and I will put together.
So the next is to look at dimensional standards by district.
Well, I had some, uses that aren't on the list. Laundry, both commercial and retail. I don't know where that would fit.
You do have it.
I think that would fit in with light industrial, honestly.
Commercial one would, but the retail one would just fall under retail. If you just had a
Like if you're
laundromat.
selling, well, no, because I think that's still a commercial entity.
A
Like,
laundromat.
yeah, I think that's industrial use, just because you're coming in and using it. I wouldn't necessarily consider that retail, because retail would be like selling washers and dryers. That's my personal thought, but
What else?
That's a Jeremy question.
Okay, that was one. The other one is, where does like a salon or a barber shop fall into these groupings?
I think I put that in professional office.
I have put a note, question professional office.
Yeah, I would
what
classify that professional service.
Okay.
And then equipment rentals such as UTVs, bicycles, golf courts. Is all of that retail?
No, I wouldn't consider that
Equipment
retail
rental?
either.
I think that's vehicle sales
Well, they don't sell them, they rent them.
or rentals.
We have that somewhere.
I checked a couple times.
Because we got the ski station does summertime, and then, Rocky Mountain Tires
Yep,
all the time.
and that's a growing
Yeah.
industry.
Part of our business, yeah.
So,
So that's kind of, and I also put a note here, food bank, but maybe we could call that distribution.
or public offices, maybe,
Right now it's on city-owned. City-owned.
public services.
No, the food bank.
No, what I'm saying is it
Don't
should be,
call it public yeah.
yeah. That could kind of cover, it, again, I think that could be incorporated in with public services.
If we're covered for those things somewhere else, I'm fine with that.
Or nonprofit services, do we have that somewhere?
We don't have any nonprofit in here at all.
Not that I really, again, to me, it should just fit under services or offices, like, depending on what it is, that they're
And the
offering.
other thing that we had discussed, and this might not be the place for it, is we were talking about along Broadway and that overlay, commercial business. First floor residences not being allowed. Does that belong in this permitted land use?
I think, where you're at.
You see where I'm going?
No, I know exactly where, and I think it should be included when we're talking about the district overlay and the district rules, which is what we're getting into next, I think.
Maybe the way to handle that, just so we can get off this table.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it belonged on the table.
Is
I don't
maybe
think it
to
does.
bring those up and we go through the individual zoning. And, they were,
Come back to that.
come back to it, yeah.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yep, those are the questions that I had thought of, businesses that we currently have and may have in the future.
Did you capture Sandy's questions, Greg?
Yeah, I took notes right here at the bottom.
Okay. All right. Get back to the agenda. Anybody online for public comment?
We checked, but a second ago there was none, so.
We lost all of the
Everybody else left.
Wasn't it entertaining enough? What?
No, they were bored quite early.
It was fab.
Only members online are members of this body.
Okay. So I guess we'll move on to staff communications and updates.
The only potential application we have is we had a design review pre-app for development in C4. They didn't really give a timeline on when they're gonna submit, so
Okay.
we can cross that bridge when we get there.
So, for our next meeting, I guess, do we need to go through the dimensions, or should we come back to that and just start working through the zoning direction? Do you have any thoughts on that, Jeremy or Greg?
I think we might as well go through the dimensional standards. I don't know why we wouldn't.
Okay,
I would say let's hit it. I mean, it's not a very big table. So I would rather hit it so we can all digest it and if we'll likely have to want to come back to it anyways. This won't be the last time anyways, but I think we should at least hit it. It shouldn't take very long, I wouldn't think. That table typically goes fairly quickly.
okay. All right, so that's where we'll pick up next meeting. John, I forgot you were on. I didn't see your picture up there. Did we ignore any of your comments or thoughts through this process?
No, sir.
All right. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries,
Did-
Jeff, not at all. I was a little
Didn't
late.
mean to. All right. Anything else? Go home.
Yay! Yay!
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks. See you, John.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I think I'm taking a little mini break in February. And